that small cafe, the park across, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way.
Oh, you want to talk into there? Where is it talk to you? We're gonna get in trouble. We can't get in trouble. Hello. You gonna say hello?
Hello.
Come on, we're gonna get in trouble. We're gonna get in trouble. Say hello. Say hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Okay, let's go. Come on. Want to carry you? Want to go?
Americana got the sleepy eye, but his body's still shaking like a live wire. Sleepy senorita with their eyes on fire. Oh, Mexico, it sounds so sweet with the sun sinking low. The moon so bright, like to light up the night, make everything alright. Baby's hungry and the money's
Amazing grace, oh how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we know less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Lady, I'm your knight in shining armor, and I love you. You have made me what I am, and I am yours. My love, there's so many ways I want to say I love you. Let me hold you in my arms forevermore. You have gone and made me such a fool. I'm so lost in your love, and oh, we belong together. Won't you believe in my song?
I'll always remember the song they were playing the first time we danced, and I knew as we swayed to the music and held to each other, I fell in love with you. Could I have this dance for the rest of my life? Would you be my partner every night? When we're together, it feels so right. Could I have this dance for the rest of my life? I'll always remember that magic moment when I held you close to me as we moved together.
Plowing these fields in the hot summer sun. Over by the gate, Lordy, here she comes with a basket full of chicken and a big cold jug of sweet tea. Well, I make a little room and she climbs on up. Open up a throttle and stir a little dust. Just look at her face, she ain't a fooling me. She thinks my tractor's sexy, it really turns her on. She's always staring at me while I'm chugging along. She likes the way it's pulling while we're tilling up a land. She's even kind of crazy about my farmer's tan. She's the only one who really understands what gets me. She thinks my tractor's sexy. We ride back and forth till we run out of light. Take it to the barn, put it up for the night. Climb up in the loft, sit and talk with the radio on. She says she's got a dream and I ask what it is. She wants a little farm and a yard full of kids, and one more teeny weeny ride before I take her home. She thinks my tractor's sexy, it really turns her on. She's always staring at me while I'm chugging along. She likes the way it's pulling while we're tilling up a land. She's even kind of crazy about my farmer's tan. She's the only one who really understands my tractor. She thinks my tractor's sexy. It really turns her on. She's always staring at me while I'm chugging along. She likes the way it's pulling while we're tilling up her land. She's even kind of crazy about
Cathedral bells were tolling, and our hearts sang on. Was it the spell of Paris or the April dawn? Who knows if we shall meet again? But when the morning chimes ring sweet again, I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way.
Hello.
Thank you, Samantha. Good morning, everyone. See a lot of familiar faces out there, but for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Pat's son, Pat Jr. Just on behalf of my family, really just want to thank everybody for coming out today. My dad was never really one for a lot of public recognition or a lot of attention, but I know everyone here, he would have a big smile and a kind word for. And, he would love to see everyone here. Today's, a very bittersweet day. We're here to mourn the passing of, just he was a great man, and just such a big loss to all of our lives. But there's also a lot of joy that we have in just remembering who he was and the impact he made in our lives. And for me and my siblings is who we are. So, and just as Christians too, we have hope that we'll be reunited someday and we'll get to see him again. As we start here, I'd just like to lead us in a quick word of prayer. So, Heavenly Father, just let us not be surprised or dismayed by the news of mortality, and as if it's ever been in doubt, but rather let us learn to rest in the preciousness of the gifts you have given us, especially the gifts of eternal life and hope, by which even our present sorrows might be transformed into future joys. I pray my Father is with you now, and I pray for your comfort for all those who no longer have him. In your name, amen. Now we'll have a few readings from my siblings. Mickey, if you'd like to come up.
Before I read this, I'm going to clarify some comments Patrick said. Pat would have hated this. We are way too fancy. There is way too many people assembled here, and he wouldn't want any of this attention. I can promise you that. This reading comes from Revelation 21, 3 and 4. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be there and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away."
Shorter. Many of you may know this reading, but I changed a little bit. It's about a ship, and usually ship are referred to as she, but I changed it to he for a very special reason. I'm standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads his white sails to the moving breeze and starts for the blue ocean. He is an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch him until, at length, he hangs like a speck of white cloud just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, "There, he is gone." Gone where? Gone from my sight. That is all. He is just as large in mast, hull, and spar as he was when he left my side. And he is just as able to bear his load of living freight to his destined port. His diminished size is in me, not in him. And just at the moment when someone says, "There, he is gone," there are other eyes watching around him coming, other voices ready to take up the glad shout, "Here he comes."
First Corinthians 13, 4 through 8. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails.
Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8. There is a time for everything, a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. My dad's brother, John, will be giving today's eulogy, and after that, my siblings and I will be sharing a few words. But after that, we did want to open it up to anybody who did have a fond memory or a funny story, or just some way my dad helped, or anything you'd like to share. Just anybody who'd like to share, we'd more than welcome you to come up and speak. So, John, if you'd like to come up.
About 3 weeks before Christmas, had a chance to sit with Pat, and we looked at some scriptures from Romans, and I thought I'd just share them with you, just a couple. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. There's none righteous, no, not one. But if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Terry, I want to thank you so much for how you cared for my brother day and night. So much love you give him. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to try to get through this, people. Pat and I have a little bit of a history. Grew up together. We were in business as business partners for 37 years together. And then we bought adjoining parcels of land and built houses on them, and were next door neighbors for 30 years. I remember Pat and Terry had gone on vacation, and Pat left me his garage door opener so I could have access to the house and watch over the house. And Pat and I, after they came back, we had forgotten that I had it. And a while later, I came across it. And I discovered that even though our houses are 100 yards apart, I could open and close Pat's garage door from my patio. So one afternoon, I see Pat down there working on the car out in the garage, out in the driveway, like he always was most of the time. And so I got the clicker out and I closed the garage door. And Pat's kind of looking around. So he goes into the house, goes through the house, and sure enough, the garage door opens, and he comes back out and goes back to work. So I close the garage door again. And so he's kind of getting a little upset, and so then he heads for the front door again, because he obviously needs tools in and out of the garage. And so before he gets to the front door, I open the garage. So then I put it away. And about a week later, I got it back out and started messing with Pat again. Well, the next day at work, he comes to me and he starts telling me about this demonic possessed garage door that he has, you know. And I couldn't keep a straight face, so I finally told him, you know, that was me. Oh, he was so relieved because he was kind of a mechanical genius. He could just about make anything work. And he couldn't figure out what was wrong. I mean, he was pulling this thing apart and checking wires and all that stuff. And so we had a good time with that. And I think he came from this mechanical side, that came from my dad too, because he was always out working on the cars and fixing things, and Pat was kind of his shadow. He was always there helping him. When we lived up in Northern California, a town called Auburn, my dad had built a racetrack for go-karts, but it was a big asphalt track, and they had a seating for people and an announcer's booth and a snack bar and the whole thing, and they raced go-karts. And they had different divisions, and some of these go-karts had multiple engines on the back, and these people were really serious about their racing. Well, we had our little go-kart, and Pat was racing our go-kart. I remember it was a little blue go-kart, and he had a blue helmet, and I think he started getting into this speed thing about that time. And then later on, when we got into high school, we had an Uncle Bob, who was an adrenaline junkie. And he used to race dragsters at the Pomona Drags. And then by that time, he had gotten into racing boats. And one day, my dad took Pat and I to one of the races, and these boats were real low profile and very powerful. And they had trouble turning, and so there was a pilot and a co-pilot. And the pilot stayed on his knees behind the wheel and drove the boat. And up in front of him, in an area cut out in the bow of the boat, was for the co-pilot. And he would kneel in the boat, and when you'd go into a turn, he would throw his weight to one side or the other, almost out into the water to get the boats up on edge to turn. Well, Pat and I were sitting there, and it turned out two of the drivers didn't have co-pilots. So before I know it, Uncle Bob and Dad have Pat and I with vests on and helmets, and we're racing. And then after that, my Uncle Bob had a spare boat, or his backup boat. Well, they started having Pat drive the boat, and he was getting ready to race. I think he actually did do one race. And unfortunately, that ended when our Uncle Bob, in one of the races, there was a serious accident, and he didn't make it. He was taken from us. So. You know, when you're 15 years old and you think you're ready to drive, and you're a teenager and you know everything, nobody can tell you anything, you are so anxious to drive that you'll do some strange things. Well, we lived there in Tustin, and we had converted our garage into a family room. And so the driveway ended at the family room wall, and that's where we parked our cars. Well, one night, when Mom and Dad had gone out to play bridge, Pat decided he was going to get the key to my dad's car, and he's going to go for a joyride. Didn't turn out too well. Coming back into the driveway, I think his foot slipped off the clutch, and he crashed into the family room wall. Couldn't hide that one. I remember him coming to me, and he was just white. His face was pale, and, I'm thinking, oh, brother, you're toast. You're done. It's all over for you, Can I have your room? So Dad gets home and looks at the damage, shakes his head, says, you broke it, you fix it. And he went to bed. And I says, wait, does that mean I don't get his room? I think you've all probably heard the saying that there's three types of people in this world. Those that make things happen, those that watch things happen, and those that wonder what happened. Well, Pat made things happen. He was a doer. He got things done. He was a worker. When we went into business, most days we were on the job when the sun came up, and we were still on the job when the sun went down. And that was usually 6 or 7 days a week. I remember at one point we had worked 3 months without a day off. But that's what we had to do to make it work, you know. Because neither one of us were very good at delegating. We were out in the field working, laying pipe, right up till 2014 when we retired, closed the business. And how would I describe Pat? Some of you have already spoken of it. He was quiet. He was easygoing, hardworking, loyal. He was well-liked. He was humble, always ready to help. So I got to thinking when I was working on this was, what's Pat's legacy? I got to thinking, what is a legacy? Can you order one on Amazon? You can order anything on Amazon, right? Then I got to thinking more, and I was thinking his legacy is here. It's us. It's you and I. More specifically, it's his immediate family. It's Mickey and Natalie and their 3 kids, Emily, and Brady, and Courtney. It's, I'm sorry. Scott and Michelle, their boys, Benjamin and Aiden. Gavin and Katie, and their 2 girls, Adeline and Annabelle, and of course, Ginger the hamster. And then there's Patrick and Julia and little Rowan. And I think that's quite a legacy. They're all wonderful people, wonderful kids. About 10 years ago, Pat bought a house on the beach down in Mexico. And Pat loved to go there, loved to spend time there. Had many, many, many good memories there with family, there on the beach. And occasionally, well, not so occasionally, Pat and I'd load up tools, and we'd head down and we'd be working on projects there at the house. But our favorite time was early morning. And after all those years of getting up at 3:30 in the morning to go to the job, we were both early risers by habit. First one up, make the coffee. And we'd take our coffee. It was usually dark outside still. We'd go sit out on the patio and watch the waves come in. At a certain special time, Pat really liked it. Just as the sun was coming up over our backs, over the hills, the rays of the sun would hit the white water on the waves, and it would just sparkle. And Pat really liked that moment. And then the sun had come up, and there was usually a ponga out there collecting lobster traps. Dolphins sometimes would be out there. Occasionally you'd see a migrating whale. And we'd sit and talk. We'd talk about family, talk about what the kids were doing, what the grandkids were doing, talk about finances, future plans, politics. We got into politics a lot. Well, that's kind of where I want to remember Pat. That was a special time for both of us. And I kind of see him right now sitting on a lounge chair on a heavenly beach, watching the waves come in. cold drink in hand, just enjoying himself. Perfect, Jimmy Buffett singing. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mickey. I'm the oldest, also the tallest, evidently, of the family by the mic changes. But I want to let you all know that I'm the only one in this building, in this house of God, that knows what it was like to call Pat Gorman your stepdad. You know, he met my mom in the early 80s, and he chose her. And I was just lucky enough to go along with the ride. I have many great memories of growing up with Pat as my stepdad, but I thought I could share just a few. You know, one of my earliest memories was 1983. We were in the Pop Warner Hawaii Bowl. We were the #1 ranked team from California. In an annual tradition, we were lucky enough to play against the #1 ranked team from Hawaii. That morning, it was pouring rain from the minute we woke up. It never stopped. And it was pouring rain when we went to bed that night. I remember we were in pregame, we were doing our walkthroughs, we were assessing our plays and our opponent and figuring out where everyone needed to be to win the game. And a cameraman set up on the sidelines. He had a tripod that looked like something NASA had built. It was huge. It was homemade. And then after the tripod came the camera. It was the size of a basketball backboard, VHS tapes, early 80s. And then the battery pack was the size of a large suitcase, the size Natalie takes anytime we travel. As we were going through the plays, I remember some of the players off to the side said, "The news is here. We're going to be on the news tonight." That's CBS. Another player said, "No, I think it's NBC." Another player behind me said, "That's ABC. We're going to be on the news tonight. We're in the Hawaii Bowl." I had to let them all know we weren't going to be on the news. That was my stepfather. That was Pat. And he was creating a videotape for me. But I already had a dad. Another early childhood memory takes me to 8th grade baseball. It was hot. It was over 100 degrees. Saddleback All-Stars were assembled. We were the best team on the planet. Just ask us. Nobody could beat us. And as I stepped into the batter's box, I looked down the right field line behind the first base coach, and there was a cameraman. We assumed it had to be someone from the LA Times. The lens on the camera looked like something out of an observatory. It was feet long, feet. I jumped into the batter's box, and I could hear the clicking of the shutter. I was being photographed quite a bit. I got back into the dugout, and several of the players said, "We're going to be in the LA Times tomorrow." That's front page. That guy is from the LA Times. And I said, "No, that's Pat. That's my stepdad." And he took pictures of that day that I still have at my house, 50 of them, 8x10s of every at-bat. I think I struck out every time that day, and he captured every single moment. And I already had a dad. So when it came time to buy a car, Pat and I went down to the liquor store and we bought an Auto Trader. And there was pages and pages and pages of these little images of cars with small descriptions. And I found the one I wanted. I had $1,800 and I wanted a 1976 Toyota Corolla. It was beautiful. So Pat and I jumped into the truck. Truck was full of pipe and racks and parts and tools and all kinds of stuff. I had no idea what it was. And we went to the house that Corolla was sitting at. It was half rusted out. It didn't look anything like the picture. It had rust all the way around the entire frame. It spent its previous 12 years up in the Northeast, and wasn't washed appropriately. It was oxidized. I wanted it. It didn't matter. We'd gone that far. I wanted to leave with it, and Pat wouldn't let me make that mistake. Instead, we went back to his truck. He put the auto trader on the hood of the truck, and he said, we're going to find you one today, but you're not buying that car. So we found a 1979 Toyota Celica just a few miles away. It had mini blinds in the back of it, a hatchback with mini blinds. You could close them and open them. It had the most beautiful 8-track player and a sunroof that you could open and close by rolling it up and down. And we had that car for 3 or 4 years and sold it for more than it was worth. We, as Pat, put a clutch in it, and I watched and tried not to get hurt. We, was Pat, put wheels and tires on it, and I helped a little bit and tried not to get hurt. And we sold that car for $2,200 4 years later. It wasn't the car I wanted. It's the car that Pat knew I should have. He did all that for me. And I already had a dad. So let me take you to high school. I graduate. I'm headed to Saddleback, the same school that he's sitting in that linebacker pose on the back wall. I'm headed there. Summer football hasn't started. Fall baseball is in the distant future. And it's time to go to work. I got to get some extra money. So I went to work with Pat. I didn't realize alarm clocks went off at 3:30 in the morning. And John wasn't kidding. Every day. I was the worst plumber that could have ever possibly taken to a job site. We get up at 3:30 every morning. We'd be at the shop. We'd meet John by 4 or 4:30. We'd get all these tools and supplies and stuff that I didn't even know what it did, and we put it on the truck. We'd be on a job site by 6 o'clock in the morning, and some guy in a hard hat and a key would unlock the gate. We'd be the first one in, like we're in a race. I don't know why we had to get there so early. We'd also be the last one to leave. John wasn't kidding about any of that. I wasn't very good at it. It was backbreaking work. We carried large pipes over our shoulders and put them in ditches that we dug the day before. There were these big clay pipes that we had to team lift and put in those same ditches. And days became weeks, week became a month, and I told Pat I wasn't going to be a plumber. I'm sure he said, thank goodness. But he didn't. He didn't. He knew it wasn't my calling. He looked at me and said, you're getting better at this every day. He did that for me. And I already had a dad. So fast forward, Natalie and I have our 3 kids. They're playing sports all over Southern California and Central California, and all of them played multiple sports, softball, soccer, baseball, football, basketball, you name it. And Papa, he was now known as, he wasn't Pat anymore, he's Papa. We changed his name. He came to a game every single season, never missed a game. And as John said, they worked 6 and 7 days a week, and we lived quite far, a number of times. And he would always come to a game. He never missed a season. He would always come to a game. And whether it was arriving in La Quinta, Coach Joel with the Purple Panthers shirt and a purple hat, or showing up in Santa Clarita to root on the Heart Red team, he was always dressed just like a player. His shirt, his hat, everything matched the team. I was coaching it, one of the kids was playing on it, and he looked like he could jump in the dugout at a moment's notice. I don't know if he dressed that way or my mom dressed him that way, but he looked amazing. And he always chose the best spot in the stands. And since I was on the field, I could always hear him. My 3 kids could do no wrong. Even when they did a lot of wrong on those fields, they could do no wrong in his eyes. They were not only the best player on the field that day, they were the best player on the planet. And he told them every time. He did all that for me. And I already had a dad. The night before Papa passed, I talked to him on the phone. The last 6 months, last year, last 2 years were really hard. And that night, his voice was louder. His words were clearer. I believe in my heart, God took his body at that time and allowed him to talk to me. And my mom was translating. I asked my mom to be quiet because I could understand everything he was saying, and that was unusual because it was really hard at the end. and he wanted to talk about the stock market, specifically CVS stock, where I work. He knew more about the market and the stock of the company that I worked for than I did. He was very proud that the stock price had just hit 110. It was a 5-year high. And he was giving me all the accolades. He said, Mick, that stock price is because of you. I had to remind him there's 290,000 other people that work at CVS, and it wasn't me that was driving the stock price. But I appreciated him for that. He also held me accountable when the stock went the other way. Make no mistake about that. He told me the stock price was a result of my hard work, my work ethic, and it wasn't going to drop again. And I got that hard work and that work ethic from him. I chose not to be a plumber, but he taught me a lot. He did all that for me, and I already had a dad. You know, I expect these examples that I've shared shed some light on what it was like to grow up with Pat Gorman as a stepfather. He chose my mom, and I just ended up on the ride. The last 40 years were a great ride. A ride filled with smiles, with cheers, and a lot of love. What I learned over the last 40 years is he chose me too. He didn't have to, but he did. And I'm a better man for it. But wait, I already had a dad, and his name was Pat Gorman.
Come back down for me here. Well, I did struggle with what I wanted to talk about today. I wasn't sure what I wanted to share or keep close to my heart. All of you had a unique relationship with my dad. That's why you're here. You all know what a wonderful man he is. When I was little, about 5, my dad used to take me to Laguna Beach on Sunday mornings. And we would go to Jolly Roger, and we'd have a short stack. And I specifically had it because I was short. After that, we'd walk out to Main Beach, and there were these really big swings, huge. Maybe they weren't that big, but they seemed that big to me for sure. And he'd push me on the swings. And he had these little animals that he would do when I would swing. So he'd push me, and I'd come back, and he'd do the alligator. And he'd push me again. He'd do the woodpecker. I didn't like that one. That one hurt. And then he'd push me. And my very favorite is I'd come back, and he'd grab me. And that was the bear. And that was my best. That was the best one, for sure. My dad taught me how to drive a ditch witch when I was 7 or 8. And that's because I used to go on the job site with him on Saturdays. And one day we were out there, Uncle John wasn't with us, and he needed some help. So he's like, Michelle, jump up there, let's go. Let me show you this, I'll move this, you do this. Now don't do this because I'm going in the hole. So you just wait a second. But boy, he had a lot of confidence in me, a lot. And all of my mechanical attributes come from him. I'm really lucky to have that. That's something I carry with me every day. And I'm sure you all know his multi-tool that he always had on his hip. You know, you never find him without that. But he taught me a lot. And then I think I realized in in preparing for today that he taught me a lot that I didn't even realize, that you just absorb from your dad. My family, my boys, have such wonderful memories with their papa. Going on the cart, almost wrecking the cart, crashing the cart. Papa didn't really care, though. He just wanted the boys to have fun. Measuring. Now, all the grandkids here know this. When you'd go to Anna and Papa's house, it was the very first thing that would happen. You'd get measured. Every time. And it was always him. He'd come out with his pencil and his ruler. He'd get the stick out, stand up straight. No, don't step on your tiptoes. No, back against that wall. Stand up straight. And he'd measure and he'd write the date. Something as little as that. It actually wasn't little, it was big. It was very big. You all know Dad's uniform. Levi's, t-shirt, the pocket. We call those Papa shirts in my house. Any t-shirt with a pocket is a Papa shirt. And then later days, first it was a cell phone for a while, but that kept falling out. So then he switched to putting his glasses there, and he had the little thing that keep his glasses. But boy, that uniform, throughout the years. And then the flannels came, right? So the Levi's and the Papa shirts and the flannels. Pretty simple guy, right? My dad was a man of few words, as you all know. He didn't raise his voice very often. And as a matter of fact, the very worst thing that could happen to you is if you told him something and he remained completely silent. This was arms crossed, a little bit away, and complete silence. You knew that he wasn't real super jazzed about what you just told him. But he's proud of all of us, and he knew we would find our own way. It may have not been the path that he had envisioned for us, but he supported us however we got where we were going to go, where we were going to go. And being a parent now, I really take to heart what he told me during one of those extended talks. He said, "It's my job to worry about you, no matter how old you are, and no matter how old I am." About a year and a half ago, we were visiting, and it was our time to leave. And those visits got harder and harder, and leaving was harder and harder. My family lives about 8-hour drive away, so not just down the street. And that visit had been very hard for him, physically. And for some reason, I just had this feeling that I wasn't going to see him again. And I started to cry when I said goodbye. And he said, "Don't cry for me. You need to be strong." So I wiped myself up and, "Okay, Dad, all right." So I went and got in the car and we pulled away. And as we're driving down the road, I realized that I wasn't crying for him. I was crying for me. It was my turn to worry about him. Every person in this room watched a man who always worked hard, was under a car, on a tractor, helping somebody. We watched a man who was always moving, not be able to move anymore. And we all mourned that while it was happening. He deserved more. We deserved more of him. My dad, Papa, Pat. We will all take you with us as we move through our lives. It's still hard to accept that you're not physically here with us. But what I'm absolutely sure of is that you watch over us every single day. Because no matter whether he's here or there, he still worries.
So I've had a lot of trouble figuring out what to say too, because I guess it's just, funny thing is when you lose somebody that's so close to you, everything gets a little muddled, but I always felt like, Dad was always so special to us, and there were a lot of little things that made him that way. And so I thought I'd share a little bit of some stories and then some wisdom that he taught us that maybe can share with you. I was always so proud of my dad. And I was proud to point him out to friends, and I always thought he was so handsome, and proud of how he and Uncle John ran their business. And he was always kind, and that's the number one thing that I've heard shared when people are giving me their condolences, is how kind he was. And he being the humble man that he was, I don't think he always agreed with my admiration. He used to tell me, don't put me up on a pedestal because it's going to hurt really bad when I fall off. So, but he never did. Dad was a pretty honest guy. He used to quote his father saying, "The only thing worse than a thief is a liar." And I don't think I ever heard a lie out of Dad's mouth. There were things that he wouldn't say, but if he said it, we could count on it being true. Dad was very wise and perceptive. He was an excellent listener. We would always go to seek his advice on many different things. Cars, or things going around the house, or things with relationships, with friends, or in our workplace, or many different things. Except for major things, he would not readily give his opinion without being asked. And even then, it would take a lot of coaxing. "Yes, Dad, I really want to know what you think, please." To actually get his input. So his method was more to give us things to think about when making a decision, rather than just giving an answer or telling what he thought. Like, "Well, did you consider this or think about this part?" I think that was kind of a nice exercise to go through. I guess it's teaching us to fish rather than just giving us the fish. And so those lessons will always carry on in our lives. Dad always taught us about consequences. Things we could do could have a good consequence or a bad consequence. He was known to say things like, "Well, you play, you pay," when talking about overindulgence or making choices on how we spent our time. Like, if you're going to stay up late and do whatever, then you're going to be really tired the next day. He was very future-minded and always encouraged us to think a few steps ahead. This is how he taught us to drive on the road and how to live life to be prepared the best that we could for things to come. Dad was an advocate for working for your marriage and taking care of your kids. And in his marriage to my mom, he was a good example of patience and investing his time in a spouse. He would come home from work and just the two of them would go talk about their day together. And we knew that was the time when we were not allowed to be there. It was just for them. And he also believed in what he called the united front. He would never give us an answer without talking to mom first to make sure they were on the same page. I think that taught us a lot about respect for the other in the relationship and how to best present yourself to your kids. And we're trying to emulate that a bit in the way we raise our kids. He encouraged us to make good friends and not be caught up with the wrong people telling us that we could be guilty by association. That was his phrase. If we got caught up in the wrong thing, even if we weren't doing wrong ourselves. Dad was a very hard worker, as you've heard. He had a great sense of responsibility to fulfill his obligations and follow through with his word. He worked very hard for his family. He wasn't one to complain. Even at the end of his life, in the midst of huge physical struggles, the worst complaint that I got out of him was, "This stinks." I felt like there were plenty worse things he could have said about that. Dad taught us that we can only make the best decision we can at the time. He said there were things along the way he wished he had done differently. We often heard him say that life's not fair and that we couldn't expect it to be. Now my kids quote that. They say life's not fair in the Papa voice. So he used to tell us, if you ever have a problem with how you were raised, you can get a great book. It's called Bad Childhood, Good Life. I'm like, Dad, we're not criticizing. You did great. Dad couldn't make anything work. I heard once it said that he took some kind of an aptitude test, and it showed that he was like a genius level in mechanics and finding out the way things work. And he could usually fabricate a solution to whatever project he was working on. So like Mickey said about the tripod, or there were things in the garage that he would piece together to suit his need, and it was kind of amazing to see the things he would come up with. Although there was a school project or two that he kind of hijacked, and I remember this one mousetrap that I made, he made for 5th grade, and it had a catapult. The mouse would set off the mechanism and it would catapult him into a sticky pad on the other side. So I think I also had to make a thing that would register earthquakes, and he used what is it called? The plumb bob, thank you. Like a heavy thing, and it would kind of record it on the paper, but yeah, if he couldn't find something, he would make it. Dad had a strong sense of humor, and he could also be mischievous. I know Aunt Diane said even as a boy he was full of mischief, and I think he maintained that most of his life. He was also incredibly generous, and he would lend money, a hand, his time, or an ear to those who asked. I'm sure if we took a show of hands, probably at least a third of us have a toilet installed by Pat Gorman. I have 2. So speaking of mischievous and generosity, I recall a time when we were down in Mexico, and Dad was bartering for something that he wanted to buy. He talked the person down by like half, and then put on a big smile, gave the person the price they started with to begin with, and they looked so confused. Is this guy crazy? But he enjoyed the game, but he said he knew they needed the money more than he did. Dad always took care of us. His wife and kids and grandkids always was asking about things he knew were coming up. He always strived to make sure we were all okay. If he felt like something was wrong, he would ask us if everything was okay. I even remember him in the bed when he couldn't do a whole lot. If he thought I looked stressed in my face, he would ask, and he had plenty of other things to concern him then, but it mattered to him how we were doing. He just always wanted to know what we were up to. He would always call to check on the girls when they were sick, or ask through Mom sometimes, but I have a voicemail saved on my phone of, "This is Dad. I'm just calling to check and see how Addie's doing this morning," because she had been sick. He was always our rock of our family, always our safety net. And we could always count on him, always rely on him. I feel like he always made us feel safe. He also loved to feed everybody, whether it was a barbecue at his house or hosting Christmas Eve for our extended family or taking us all out to dinner. That was kind of his joy, is feeding the people he loved. So we thought it appropriate that we're feeding you today. He's feeding you today. Dad was also a peacekeeper. And he didn't speak badly about people. And I admire him for that. He would keep quiet if he had nothing good to say in general. He loved his people with all his might. When we were younger, if we asked if something would bother him about Mom or something that she did, he would say, "It's just my job to love her." And I remember asking him, complaining about something Patrick did. We were just a year apart, and he would tell me it wasn't my job to mother him, it was my job to love him. And that was so often his advice, is just to love. So I had the honor and the privilege of being Pat Gorman's daughter, and I'll do my best to carry on the legacy of the things that he's taught us. It's been very hard to lose him, and like he said, he died one piece at a time. But we're all so blessed to be his.
Well, we've known this day has been coming for a while, and I also had a pretty hard time thinking about what I wanted to say and share about my dad. I don't really think I could do justice to sum up his life or really put into words how I felt about him. And but I did kind of land on as several of us mentioned, legacy. Who he was and what he passed on to us. I became a dad myself about 2 years ago, and just have put a lot of thought into what he gave to me and that I want to give to my son to pass on. And through that, I think a part of him will live on, through us, through his family and friends, and just the things he's given us. And some of these will be the same themes that you've heard about from a lot of us already, but I think those are pretty core aspects of who he was. So some of those things are his hard work, his honesty, his care for those he loved, and his willingness to help, and just some of his practical wisdom for navigating the world. As you've heard, he was just one of the hardest workers I've ever met. Up at 3:30 every day, and he hit the ground running, and the job sites before the sun's up, and those times I had to go to work with him, I could barely, I was just doing everything I can to keep up with him, and I needed a couple days to recover, but he's up at 3:30 the next day, back at it. So, just the care he had for providing for his family was always just such a driving force for him, and he loved his family so much. I mean, just the care he had for all of us. And, as he said, he was willing to help and do whatever he could to just anything we needed. I remember a time I broke down, 30 miles away, and I gave him a call and like, "Dad, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's wrong with it." He's like, "Okay, let me grab my tools. I'll be there in a minute." And he got the car, at least limping home, and, we were able to get it fixed. But, that was the kind of guy he was. Just if anyone was in need, he'd be willing to drop whatever it was, and he'd be there for him. He was an honest man, as my sister said, he maybe wouldn't tell you everything, but he wouldn't say anything that wasn't true. And as the same quote, the only thing worse than a thief was a liar, which is the saying he got from his own dad that he passed on to us as well. And you could always count on what he said to be true. And if you asked his opinion, you'd have to force it out of him a bit, but, you could count on it to be good advice. And, he just had that practical wisdom. My sister and I would joke, we got talk number, 205 from Dad again, but he'd have, little sayings, just good advice for our life. I think, as my sister said, the same saying, life's not fair. That was a common saying, and just many of the other little sayings he had will stick with us. And I'm sure, as those situations arise, I'll be able to share those with my own son. I'm ultimately, I'm just proud to have him as a dad. He was just a wonderful man, and so. He wasn't much of a talker, and I guess I got that from him. So, but I think that's it for me. But I think his grandkids would all like to come up and say a few words as well. So if you want to come up.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Good. All right. So for those who don't know us, my name is Brady, and these are my sisters, Emily and Courtney, and then my younger grandkids, Addie and Annabelle, and Ben and Aiden. Our papa was a man of few words, but he always was the best listener with the kindest heart. His laugh was infectious. He always had the biggest smile on his face. We were truly so lucky to have our grandpa in our lives. He loved and cared for us, our family, so much, and he was one of the smartest, and that's underlined, smartest, hardworking men that we knew. We have a couple memories that we like to share about Papa. Okay. Our grandparents came to so many of our sports games over the years, and Papa would show up wearing our team's hat, as my dad was talking about. Every time, it didn't matter what colors the team were, he always made sure he had our team's hat, our team's shirt, whatever it may be. He was always at all of our graduations and birthdays, no matter where they were. He traveled to visit Emily in college, both in Washington and in Santa Barbara. He was always there. We were so lucky to always have him there. When Papa and Anna came to visit, Papa would always call our house organized chaos every time. There'd be kids running around, food going, that kind of stuff. But he just loved being there, just sitting there and being, part of the organized chaos. There was one specific time I want to allude to. It was one of the holiday seasons, and there would be so much going on, like I'm talking about, and me and Papa would literally sit down on the couch for 2 days straight and just watch football. Nothing else going on. And we didn't say a whole lot, but we just loved being in each other's presence and just, doing that kind of thing. He really loved being all together no matter what was going on. When my sister Courtney was little, she would always like to play school. She would have her whiteboard, she'd make Anna and Papa sit down, be her students, that kind of thing. Courtney would always say that Papa was a very good student. He can do no wrong, and that was very true. At the beginning of every school year, Papa would always want to know what our class schedules were. Every time we said history class, he loved history, and he'd want to know what years of history we were learning, World War II, whatever it may be. He just loved it, listen about history, and that was special. He would always, he could talk about history for hours. He was such an intellectual man and always wanted to know what was new in our lives every time. Whether I had a girlfriend, whether they had boyfriends, no matter what, he just wanted to know what was going on, and that was really important. One of my favorite memories of Papa growing up was riding in the cart. Every time we would go to Anna and Papa's house, he'd always have it fully charged and we'd be ready to go, no matter what. Papa would always make sure that, he just knew how much we loved riding that cart. He really did, and he just wanted to make sure that I was ready to go. He also taught each of us how to drive the tractor. There's a big tractor, and we're all taught how to do that. And it was special. And we got to ride in the bright blue Mustang that he built up himself, and he was just truly a jack of all trades. There was also another time where I was riding the motorcycle that Papa and Anna also had, and I had crashed into the wall there and flew up in the air, landed back on the engine. And I remember the very next time we came back to visit, I was back on that motorcycle and I was driving more than I did, when I crashed. So our trips with our grandparents with the Mexico house were unforgettable. We always looked forward to going there. Sitting in the lounge chairs in the morning, drinking coffee and watching the waves, playing volleyball together, dinner at Charlie's. We just loved our time together, and it was special. Growing up, as was talked about prior, it was our tradition to get our height measured by Papa every time we went to their house, and I knew I'd always be so excited because at that age I kept growing, and I wanted to see how tall we can get. We had all of our names on the wall with the dates from each of our time measured our height. He'd use his tape measure and his pencil to see how much we have grown since the last time, and eventually transferred all those measures onto our own personal sticks that had our name on them. And we were always so excited to find out how much we'd grown, and we wouldn't leave Anna and Papa's house until we got measured. And he made sure of that. He said, "You guys aren't going until you get measured," and we sure did. When my sisters would wear jeans that had holes in them, and they still do, Papa would always ask if they had patches for those because he wanted to patch them, or if they actually made and sold jeans like those that you could buy in the store. He was just shocked that people actually bought jeans that had holes in them. And that would always make them laugh. He would tell them that he himself can put holes in them for free. You didn't have to buy patches for him. He'll do it himself. It was times like these that made our Papa so special to us. Although we miss him so much, his smile, his laugh, and his unconditional love, there are so many wonderful memories with Papa that we will cherish forever. And it'll take for us forever. We are so proud to call him our Papa and lucky to have him in our lives. And we love you, Papa, until we meet again. Come here. Oh, take it.
I really miss Papa, and I wish he was here with us, but he doesn't have to suffer anymore. He always asked me what I learned at school. He was just smart, brave, clever, and strong. He really had an amazing sense of humor. Papa always had the biggest smile on his face just for me. I'm always up so late at night making a bunch of jiggies, and I got all that creativity from Papa. Papa was weak and couldn't do much, but he always tried his best to play with me. Papa loved me and all the rest of us too so much, and he always tried his best. We'll see him in heaven someday, so we can be together again.
Now we'd just like to open it up if anybody does have anything they'd like to share about my dad. So yeah, feel free to come up.
Good afternoon. Pat and I had a lot in common. We were married to two of the gospel girls. And when we met at family meetings, we always went over to the side and we had a conversation. And guess what we talked about? Our wives. And those conversations will remain confidential to this very day. But Terry, probably I'm thinking today of May 14th of 1983, when I was honored to officiate your wedding. And that was a very special moment in time for you and for me and for all the family. And I know that I was so happy that you found each other. You've been so blessed. You were always there for each other, in good times and in difficult times, as you promised to do on that very day. And I know that you will have family and friends to stand by you in the days ahead. And I'd like to change Pat's name just a little bit as I give an Irish blessing. Patrick O'Gorman, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. The sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your grave. Until we all meet again in the new creation, the kingdom of light and love, the kingdom of heaven. May God hold you, Pat, in the palm of his hand. Amen. May he rest in peace. Amen.
She had some words she wanted to say. You want to say?
It's been so hard for us to live without Papa, but we all can survive without him, and we all can do it all without him, but it's really sad.
You know, I wasn't going to say anything, but I just have a lot of fond memory of Pat and everything he meant to everybody here, and what a great family to be a part of and be married into, and God has blessed me beyond recognition. And, you know, he taught us how to live, how to teach your family, and how to have integrity and be honest and upright and true. And he was a man of few words, but I was able to pry a lot out of him when we go sit, play chess together, or hang out. He was my best bud. We'd go hang out and, you know, watch games, talk politics. He would ask about my job, what crazy stuff I saw that day, or which is every day. But I remember when I first asked him if I could marry Kate, because I wanted to do it right and got his permission, you know. And I called him up and I said, hey, I'd like to have dinner with you. And he knew something was up right then. He's like, oh, okay. So went and had dinner and hung out and talked with Terry and Pat, and she started crying. She was really happy. And Pat looked at my truck outside, and he was like, what's your most valued possession? I said, oh, and my gold and silver collection, and my, you know. He goes, I see you take good care of that truck. And I go, yes, sir. And he said, well, I expect you to take care of my daughter better than that. So I'm doing my best. Thanks.
All right, we're going to have Samantha play one more song for us. So one of my dad's favorite things was just sharing a meal with just friends and family and people he cared about. So at this time, we have, if this side of the auditorium, if you want to head that way, we have food for everybody, and we would just really be happy if you'd like to stay and hang out for a while, and just if we could just all be together, we'd appreciate it. So thank you all for coming.